Hey everyone, Duke here, and today we're going over my Void Warlock build using the new mods and setups in Lightfall. I know everyone's all over Strand, and I've enjoyed what I've played of it, but Void has always felt so good to me and feels even better this season, so let's talk about class setup, mods, stats, and weapons. Do note that a lot of what I'll be talking about will also be valuable information for Void Hunters and Void Titans, and even just all classes in general when it comes to certain mods. Starting off with your super, of course you've got multiple options between Vortex, Nova Warp, and the Cataclysm Nova Bomb. Personally, I don't think Nova Warp is really worth using. I am definitely between Vortex and Cataclysm. I've used Cataclysm mostly, if not only, in the past, but I've actually switched over to Vortex quite a bit this season, and it feels quite good. Of course, the downside is you can completely just whiff your Nova Bomb, but the ability to kind of suck everything in and continually damage everything that is there, just kind of like a big Vortex grenade, is really, really strong and really, really useful, and I do feel like this super, when landed, ends up feeling a lot better, at least in the cases that I usually use it. Of course, again, if you're using this against something that's moving a lot or just difficult to land it on, Cataclysm's totally fine. I think this is pretty optional in terms of which super you want to use. Again, I wouldn't recommend Nova Warp personally. For class ability, I personally use Healing Rift. I can definitely see the value in Empowering Rift, especially with how much we're going to be using Devour. I just like extra safety. My whole kind of idea of Destiny is to just be alive. If you're not alive, you can't do damage, you can't do anything. Being alive is step number one in every single thing that you do. I'm very, very focused on survival with like all builds and all things that I do. So I run Healing Rift. I could definitely see the value in Empowering Rift. Your jump, totally your idea. I like Burst Glide, whatever you want to use. Melee, you've only got one. And Grenade, Vortex, I think is definitely the strongest option here. I think the Vortex Grenade is super duper good, kind of like the Super Vortex. It pulls everything in, it lasts a very long time, it works very, very well with kind of some of the other stuff we're going to have in our build. I'd highly recommend the Vortex Grenade. Now for aspects, we have Feed the Void. I think this is non-negotiable. This is going to allow you to actually get Devour, which is kind of the crux of this entire build. If you've never used Void before, just don't know what Devour does, basically it will instantly heal you whenever you proc it by getting a Void ability kill, and then it will last between 10 and 15 seconds, depending on if you're using a certain fragment, and as long as you get another kill within that timer before it runs out, it will instantly full heal you again, and it can constantly refresh just based on any kills after proccing it once, so extremely strong and definitely the main focus of our build. Now there's two other aspects that Void has for Warlock. It's either Chaos Accelerant or Child of the Old Gods. I like Chaos Accelerant, and there's going to be two options here. So Chaos Accelerant you pretty much need to have for Controverse Holds. I am using Controverse Holds for my exotic of choice. This allows you to improve your charge for your Void Grenades, and also will return a significant portion of your grenade energy when you're landing your grenade on enemies. The great thing about Controverse Hold is it doesn't need to kill anything. If you don't kill anything with the grenade, it will still keep charging, it'll still keep giving you that grenade energy back. Super duper useful. Now, again, if you're using Controverse Holds, I think the option you have to do is Chaos Accelerant, because those Vortex Grenades are going to get increased the size and linger duration when you use it, and not only that, but it allows you to actually overcharge the grenade in the first place, which is what Controverse Holds wants to do. So Controverse Holds goes with this aspect 100% of the time. Now your other option is Child of the Old Gods. This is also a really good aspect, and I wish we could just use all three. Like, all three are very good options, but with Controverse, this one just has to be left behind, sadly. But this will create a Void Soul. It creates a weakening effect whenever you use your Rift and attack something. That'll give you 15% damage debuff, or basically 15% more damage on the target or any targets around it that are weakened by the Void Soul. And you also get grenade and melee energy. You also get health, depending on if you're running healing or empowering Rift. And you also get class ability energy back when you defeat targets that are being drained by this soul. Now the exotic that you're going to want to use in this case is definitely Nezarec Sin. It is going to give you ability energy recharge whenever you get any void kills. So that's all of your void abilities. That's void weapons as well. And there's an argument to be made, especially with a lot of the other things we're going to talk about in this build, that Nezarec Sin may be more useful than Controverse Holds. I feel like Controverse is a little bit more flexible because, again, this requires kills. If you're fighting stuff that's quite tanky, you're fighting like only champions or just like a lot of like majors and mini bosses and stuff like that, Nezarec is not going to be as good. But in more kind of baseline content or a lot of like the battlegrounds and stuff like that, where there's just infinite amount of ads and mostly very killable ads, Nezarec is very strong. Again, especially with some of the other things that we're going to talk about in this build. So you got two options, you got kind of different ways you can go about it, but your choice. Maybe make both builds, try both, have them for different situations. Do know that by running Chaos Accelerant, we do lose a fragment slot. We only have 3 fragments instead of 4. And I really don't think any of these fragments, at least for me personally, are even negotiable when it comes to these 3 that I'm using. I'm running Echo of Remnants, which allows the Vortex Grenade to have increased duration. Very, very useful with everything else that we're doing, kind of built around the Vortex Grenade. We are running Echo of Persistence, which allows for Void buffs to have increased duration, which is going to be Devour increase, and also going to actually be Invisibility increase, because my 3rd fragment is Echo of Obscurity, which allows for Finisher Final Blows to grant invisibility. I feel like this is potentially the most underrated fragment in the entire game on any subclass ever. This is really, really strong. A lot of people don't know this, and, you know, it can make some sense on why you wouldn't know this, but this is every finisher. Like, there's no, you don't have to finisher like a certain type of enemy. It doesn't have to be like a champion or a major or anything like that. You finisher an enemy, any enemy, red bar could be 2 health enemy. As long as you finisher, you get invisibility, which is for about 6 seconds with this increased invisibility. And that's really, really useful on all Void classes. I run this on all Void classes, Hunter, Warlock, Titan. But on top of Devour, if you already have Devour proc, that finisher will give you that Devour, give you full health, and give you invisibility, allow you to kind of reset yourself. And this also has no cooldown. There's no cooldown to it. You can finisher, go invis, finisher again, go invis. Do note, of course, with all invis abilities, as soon as you attack something, you're going to go uninvisible. But like that 5+ seconds of invisibility to kind of reset yourself, recover health if you need to, or kind of reposition yourself, and then get yourself in a new position, it's mind-blowingly good. It's mind-blowingly good. If you've never used it before, it may take a little bit of getting used to kind of see the value and like really get the value out of it, but it is huge. It is so strong, and you get 10 extra recovery. It never hurts. It's not even like, this is a mod or the fragment that's so strong, I would not be surprised to see it have like a minus effect, kind of like Echo of Persistence. It has a plus effect on top of that. So huge fragment here. Very highly recommend. The downside is there are a lot of actually really good Void fragments, so again, there's room for maneuverability. I said these are the 3. I personally don't think there's any other ones I would ever use for these 3 fragments, but there are other really, really strong options. We have Echo of Starvation. This allows for any orb of power you pick up, which with the build we're running and just the way the game is working now, really easy to get lots of orbs. That instantly grants you Devour. However, for me, I feel like with our ability uptime as is anyway, we pretty much can get Devour anyway. We can get Devour off of a grenade kill, a melee kill, like super if we need to. Like, we have ways to get Devour without this. I feel like we don't need this on top of it. I could see it. Again, it's really, really good, but like, I don't think it's necessary personally. So that's why I'm running the other 3 over this one. Of course, we have Echo of Instability, where defeating targets with your grenades grants volatile rounds to void weapons. This could be a very useful mod in general. This season, there's absolutely 0 reason to run it. We'll show you why in a second, but it's a strong fragment in general. And our final fragment to talk about is Echo of Undermining. I feel like this is another really strong and popular fragment to use. Your void grenades will weaken targets. That makes it a 15% debuff, as we talked about earlier, to said target. But to me, in general, like, usually you're not going to care that much about this. Either you're using your grenade and it's just going to kill it anyway, or you're using your grenade to kind of help kill it with a weapon. You're not really usually going to use this for like DPS because you either have like a tether or a div or a tractor cannon or something like that. There are scenarios in which I do throw this on if like we really need a debuff for DPS and for some reason nobody else has the ability to run it. I definitely like this being an option. I personally don't want to run this like as a permanent always there fragment, but this is definitely a very strong option and good to know it exists. Now, when it comes to stats, we are going to absolutely want to maximize resilience. I know they nerfed it from 40% down to 30%, but for PvE, 30% damage reduction, nothing is going to come close to that in terms of value and strength. Number 1 top tier priority is 100 resilience, bar none. Everything else comes well after that. To me, on all 3 classes, I don't think any other class, even hunters, I know, like, you know, hunters have it a little rough where they need mobility and resilience, and you still kind of want recovery if possible. But even hunters, hunter resilience is number 1 top priority for everything in PvE. Now for Warlock specifically, again, recovery is good in general. It's a little weird, right? Because Devour means that recovery means nothing. Like, you don't technically need any recovery with Devour, because if you proc Devour, you just insta-heal to full. And as long as you keep Devour up, you get another kill, you insta-heal to full. However, recovery also adjusts your cooldown of your Rift, so you definitely want that up more. And there's a couple ways that we're going to use the Rift to get more abilities and stuff like that, so that's very useful. And to be fair, like, honestly, a lot of the other stats don't really matter. Like, mobility means nothing to me in PvE on a Warlock, so like, if I can get 100 recovery too after 100 resilience, awesome. But I'd say out of the 3 stats we're going to talk about, recovery is actually kind of arguably the least important. I'd try to get it up a little bit, again, just for that cooldown. It's nice, and, you know, maybe if you don't have Devour procced and don't have a Rift, like, you might want that to be able to be kicked in, but recovery is less important than resilience for sure, and also less important than discipline, because, as we were talking about, our build's very much around Controverse Hold, or even Nezarec Sin, very much around abilities, very much specifically around grenades, and we want discipline so we can get our grenade up as much as possible. Definitely want to try to get this to tier 10, or at least as high as you can. Obviously, the higher it is, the lower your cooldown is, so to me, I think the priority stats are resilience number 1, by far, like, not even close, discipline 2nd, and then recovery 3rd. Now, weapons are going to be very, like, situational and, like, what you want to use. In a lot of cases, kind of my flexible weapons that I'm using in just, like, everyday content type of stuff, running Witherhoard, running Funnel Web, running Commemoration. Witherhoard is just a nice flexible option to have in the kinetic slot, like, nothing super special about it in terms of the build that we're running, but it's nice to have. There's definitely whatever you want to run here. Arbalist is another really good option in terms of like a little bit longer range, especially if you're doing something with champions, barrier champions, or if there's like a lot of shields that you want to break a little bit easier. Match game is gone, so we don't absolutely need the correct shield break like we did in the past, but Arbalist is still a good option. Also, Chill Clip, Fusion Rifles, also a very good option to be able to deal with overloads in terms of the first shot. You can also technically deal with unstoppables when you freeze them, and Fusion Rifles are just, to me, in a pretty good spot in general in most cases, and they give you a pretty solid, flexible, special ammo weapon to use in this build. Our energy weapon is Funnel Web. SMGs are just in a really good spot right now for just kind of like everyday content, or just in general. Like, SMG's really, really good. They're also overload if you need it for overloads, so awesome there as well. But this really what you want here in most cases is a void weapon to be able to take advantage of volatile rounds and volatile flow, which we'll talk about in a second, and a couple other mods in general. Now, if there's like a surge or a champion type, like maybe you're facing unstoppables and it's solar surge, I've put in Trustee here a lot of times for something like that. But again, weapons are very much your choice. I'm just kind of talking about the theory behind it. The reason we want a void weapon here, if possible, and if no other like reasoning stops us from doing that, is for a couple mods we're going to talk about. And same with our heavy Commemoration. LMGs are nuts right now. Like, I cannot describe to you how good machine guns are. They got a 10% damage buff. They got a significant increase in their reserves, and we have a couple mods we're going to talk about in just a second in the artifact that really, really amplify these. Just machine guns in general. Again, void specific machine gun is very, very useful for a couple of the mods in the way we're building this. And again, if you're running double void, Nezarec Sin comes back into play and is really, really strong. Controverse Hold comes a little bit more value and a little bit more flexible if you're not going to run void, which again, there's going to be a lot of cases you may not want to run void, and there's definitely a lot of cases you may not want to run an LMG, like if you need to do more impactful damage, like a rocket or something. Or LFRs are still actually in a pretty good place even with the nerf, especially Cataclysmic, so keep those in mind as well. And of course, there's multiple void LMG options, or just LMGs in general, but if you want void, we have Retrofit Escapade from last season, we have Corrective Measure from VOG, so any void LMG with a good roll that you like to use is going to be really, really strong right now. Again, LMGs in general are just going to be really, really strong right now. But let's talk about why void is such a big boost this season. So this is how we have the artifact set up, and there's a couple specific mods that are very, very important to talk about. So our first two are two authorized mods, the Void authorized mod and the Grenade authorized mod. Again, our build is very much around Void weapons. This is going to increase the armor costs of any armor mods that affect our Void weapons. Beautiful. And our build is very much around grenades, and this is going to reduce the cost, armor energy cost of any armor mods that affects our grenades. So these two fit perfectly into our build. They're not like absolutely 100% needed. Like, you know, when these go away and the mods are a little bit more expensive, we may have to like maneuver and like lose a mod here or something like that, but they're not like game changing like a few of these other ones are going to be. Next, I really like Shatter Orbs. There seems like there's a lot of void shields in general this season. So anytime you break a combatant shield with void on any of your void stuff, you'll create an orb of power. Or, you know, if you're running something, this is why I kind of talked about, like, if there is a lot of other shields, you may want to use the correct shield type for it still, even though with match game no longer existing, you still do less damage if you don't have the right shield type, and if you do have the right shield type, you get this additional bonus of an Orb of Power. This is the first, like, must have artifact perk, and that's Volatile Flow. Picking up an Orb of Power will grant your Void Weapons Volatile rounds. And we already talked about one way to get Orbs of Power. In the mods that we have, we will talk about multiple ways to get Orbs of Power. I promise you, you're going to have orbs pretty much everywhere, and this is huge. This is going to give you 10 seconds of Volatile every single time you pick up an orb. It refreshes itself when you pick up multiple orbs. Volatile is nuts, and on Void Weapons, you want this. It's just so good. Like, this is a non-negotiable perk for your artifact. The second non-negotiable perk for your artifact is Bricks from Beyond. This will allow you to get heavy ammo for both you and your teammates when you get void weapon kills on powerful combatants. Now, this isn't guaranteed, but the drop rate is pretty high. Like, I'd say 1 out of every, like, 5 at worst kills, you're gonna get a heavy brick. And, like, the heavy brick is like a full heavy brick. Like, you'll get 100 plus ammo for an LMG or, like, you know, multiple rockets or whatever else you're using. So what's great is it doesn't actually have to be a void heavy that's getting the kills, right? It has to be a void weapon that then gives us heavy. So as long as we stick on funnel web, right, that can get us the heavy. And even if we're not running commemoration or void heavy, if we're running something like cataclysmic, we're running something like hothead, whatever else, like, we can still get that ammo. So this is a super duper good mod. An artifact mod just in general, like, definitely pushes you probably towards wanting to run void energy weapons whenever possible at the very least, just because it's like, hey, if I kill like an orange bar minotaur or something, I can get heavy for not only myself but also my teammates. Like, it's huge. And our final artifact perk that we want to talk about is Void Weapon Channeling. Again, this is very void specific, but if you get a kill with a void weapon and you have at least one void ability recharged, so you do need to be on void with a void weapon for this, you will get a damage bonus. And you get a bigger bonus based on how many abilities you have recharged. So the way this works is if you have one ability recharged, you get a 10% damage bonus. If you get 2 abilities, you get a 15%, 3 abilities, you get 20%, 4 abilities, you get 25%. So that includes your super. You have your melee, your grenade, your rift, your class ability, and your super. If you have all 4 of them, when you get a kill, that's 25% max. And this lasts 10 seconds and is not refreshable. It's kind of like bait and switch, where like once you get that kill, you get that 10-second damage window of bonus. And until that 10 seconds runs out, you can't refresh it. So like you'll lose it for a second, then the next kill can immediately refresh it again. So now let's talk about mods, starting with the helmet. Most important mod in this is Void Siphon. This is going to allow for rapid void weapons to make you your Orbs of Power. Huge with Volatile Flow and just getting more supers and just helping other people get their supers and get their volatile. Like, 100% want to run this mod. Our second mod is Ashes to Assets. This will allow us to get our super. Kind of talked about it earlier. Intellect not being as important for multiple reasons, but this helps us kind of get a little bit back anyway. We're going to have a lot of grenades. We're going to get a lot of grenade kills. This is going to give us more super energy quicker to allow us to pop more supers even without intellect. And finally, I am running heavy ammo finder here. There's a lot of actually really good options for this third slot. I think these first 2 are pretty much like kind of locked into the build. This just more heavy is always good, but I think something like Powerful Friends could be very useful with how many orbs that are going to be around, helping other people get their armor charged as well. We've got Radiant Light, which allows whenever you cast your super to give more armor charge. We've got different siphons, like if you're not running Void, or maybe you're running Void and Solar or something like that, you can get even more orbs with something like that. There's a lot of really good options, but to me, I think even Dynamo gives more super when using your class ability. Like, a lot of good options here, but I think heavy ammo is probably the most flexible, and again, more heavy is always nice. Next, we've got our gloves. Again, our kind of must-have mod here is Firepower. This allows us to create another Orb of Power whenever we get Grenade Final Blows. As we just mentioned, we're going to have a lot of grenades. We're going to get a lot of grenade kills. Every time you throw a grenade and get at least 1 kill, you will make an orb for you and your teammates. Next, we're using Bolstering Detonation, which will give class ability whenever you cause damage with a grenade. So again, get more rifts. We're going to cause damage with grenades very often, let me tell you that. So more rifts, awesome. And again, we'll kind of use that to then feed back into our grenade in a second, but definitely like Bolstering Detonation here. And finally, I'm using Void Loader, especially if you're using 2 void weapons. Nice benefit as well. Now our chest piece mods, we're actually running one of each resistance. This gives us extra damage resistance against all types, which is a really nice change because you don't have to worry about affinity. Because before it's like, oh, if they're doing like solar and void damage, either you had to pray that the artifact had like a solar void combo, or pick one, because you'd either be on like solar affinity and then you could only do solar resistance, or void affinity and you only do void resistance. Now you could just do all three. I also really like Concussive Dampener, but it just fits in perfectly on this build to be able to have one of each. The other option that you could potentially consider are reserve mods. However, I don't really think these are worthwhile at all, because in locked loadout content, pretty high level, again, survivability is probably, to me, more important than like an extra shot or two that I can just get more ammo kind of as I'm going. Like that extra shot or two to start with doesn't feel nearly as good as just survival. And in not locked loadout content, you could just have a different piece, right? Like if you just, before you rally a raid flag or something, you switch on to a reserves, make sure it's all the same, like, triple arc reserves or whatever you need, right? For whatever you're using, put a reserves chest piece on, rally the flag, switch back to this chest piece. Now you have all the stats you want, you have that extra resistance that you want, and you still keep those reserves that you're starting with. Now our legs, this is where the armor charge is going to come into play. I am running 2 void weapon surges for this. Again, obviously if you switch to like cataclysmic, put on solar weapon surge. You switch to hothead, put on arc weapon surge. Like this is going to be your heavy of choice is what you're going to want to put here. Even better if your heavy and your energy are the same, because then you get the benefit for both. But this is going to give you bonus damage whenever you have armor charge, which again, you're getting your armor charge from every single orb that you pick up. Super duper nice. Armor charge lasts 10 seconds per stack and gives a total of 3 stacks total, so it's basically 30 stacks of length. There is ways to get more stacks, up to 6 if you run charged up on your chest piece. Then you can have 6 stacks, and there's also a way to increase the length of how often this decays, which we'll talk about in a second. The bonus here for the surges, in like a deep raid DPS setting, I would run 3 instead of 2. However, in like normal, just kind of like running around settings, I feel like recuperation is too good, especially again, how many orbs we're getting. We're just constantly talking about how many orbs we get, right? Being able to pick up an orb and get that insta heal, it's basically like a cure heal from just any orb that you pick up on top of Devour, on top of everything else. Like, you just, so many ways to survive. And again, to me, survival is so important, so I like to have recuperation in there for like normal settings. If I really needed to eke out maximum damage in like a raid DPS or dungeon DPS, or if I just didn't feel like I needed this at all for survival, then I would run a triple weapon surge instead of a double weapon surge plus recuperation. And finally, we have the class item. So there is one mod that is currently disabled, that is Reaper. This is going to give us another way to make Orbs of Power whenever we use our class ability, especially on Hunter. I'd recommend this one, but just in general, I mean, everyone wants to use their class abilities. Rifts are great, barricades are great, dodge is great. Like, when this becomes unlocked and usable again, I believe it was like some problem in PvP or something, but when this becomes unlocked again, I would definitely recommend trying to fit this in. But until that time, we are currently running 2 bombers. I think even just 1 bomber is really, really useful. 2 bombers makes it a little bit better, but this will allow us to get our grenade cooldown and get grenade energy back whenever we use our class ability. This is what we were talking about the whole time, where, the lower our cooldown of our class ability is, the more often we can use it, the more grenades we can get through bomber. And the other mod we're using here is Time Dilation, which is the other mod we were talking about earlier, where armor charge will now decay slower. Basically, instead of 10 seconds per armor charge stack, you will now get 15 seconds per armor charge stack. So very, very nice little benefit here. And that's all for today. I hope this video helped you consider some new options for your Void subclasses and just builds in general. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.